Australia announces it will formally recognize the state of Palestine at next month's UN General Assembly. The 12th humanitarian aid convoy crosses from Egypt into Gaza. And Egypt condemns Israel's actions as severe violations of human rights and international law. You're watching Q News at 4 with me, Henny Saif, and these are the news today. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has announced Australia will formally recognise the state of Palestine at next month's UN General Assembly. Albanese said the decision follows commitments from the Palestinian Authority, including the exclusion of Hamas from any future Palestinian government, a demilitarisation pledge and recognition of Israel's right to exist. Calling the two-state solution humanity's best hope, Albanese criticised Israel's ongoing settlement expansion and humanitarian blockade in Gaza. He described the situation as a catastrophe and said Australia could not wait for a guaranteed peace before acting. The Prime Minister also revealed he told Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu that a political solution, not a military one, is the only path forward.
Today I can confirm that at the 80th session
Egypt has welcomed Australia's announcement it will recognise the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in September, calling it a vital step towards Middle East peace. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says his country intends to formally recognise Palestine during the 80th UN General Assembly. Egypt's foreign ministry hailed the move as a historic step supporting Palestinian rights and self-determination and backing a state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem at its capital. Cairo said the decision aligns with similar actions by other nations, reflects commitment to ending Israeli occupation, and rejects settlement policies and military escalation in Gaza. Egypt urged more countries to follow suit and reaffirmed support for a two-state solution. Dozens of aid trucks from Egypt have crossed into Gaza through Karem Abu Salem, delivering food, water, medical supplies and fuel. The 12th convoy, organised by the Egyptian Red Crescent, aims to ease severe shortages in Gaza amid the ongoing crisis. Since July 27th, more than 36,000 trucks carrying nearly 500,000 tons of aid have entered the enclave, supported by 35,000 volunteers. Egypt says the Rafah crossing remains open on its side, ensuring the continuation of humanitarian deliveries. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry has welcomed plans by Australia and New Zealand to recognise the state of Palestine, urging more nations to follow suit. Palestine's Foreign Ministry hailed Australia's announcement to formally recognise the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in September, and New Zealand's plan to decide on recognition next month. It called on all countries yet to take the step to do so in support of the two-state solution and in line with international legitimacy, the Arab Peace Initiative and the New York Declaration, saying such moves would strengthen prospects for a just and lasting peace. The Jewish Council of Australia has called for Canberra's planned recognition of Palestine to be matched with firm measures against Israel over its actions in Gaza. The Council urged the Australian government to pair next month's recognition of Palestine with sanctions, an arms embargo, and suspension of military contracts with Israel. Citing what it called an intensifying genocide in Gaza, it condemned attacks, including the killing of Al Jazeera journalists, as war crimes. Executive Officer Sarah Schwartz said supporting Palestinian statehood must not coincide with supplying weapons used in the conflict. New Zealand says its cabinet will decide next month whether to recognise the state of Palestine, stressing an independent and cautious approach. Foreign Minister Winston Peters announced the decision will be taken by cabinet in the coming weeks, noting recognition has long been viewed as inevitable but remains complex. He said the government will carefully consider diverse views within New Zealand and approach the matter calmly, cautiously and judicially before making a final decision. Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al Thani has condemned Israel for killing journalists working in Gaza. In a social media post, he described the attacks as crimes beyond imagination and criticized the international community for failing to prevent the tragedy. Israel's occupation military targeted an Al Jazeera correspondent with an airstrike on Sunday, killing him, another network journalist, and at least 6 other people, all of whom were sheltering outside the Gaza City hospital complex. The UN Human Rights Office has condemned the killing of 6 Palestinian journalists in Gaza by Israeli military strikes, calling it a grave breach of international humanitarian law. Israel's occupation military said it targeted and killed one of the journalists, alleging he had headed a Hamas militant cell. The UN called for immediate, safe and unhindered access for journalists in Gaza, highlighting that at least 242 Palestinian journalists have been killed since October 7th of 2023. Reporters Without Borders has condemned an Israeli strike in Gaza that killed 5 Al Jazeera journalists, calling it a targeted attack. The press freedom group accused Israel of justifying the killings by branding one of the journalists a terrorist without credible evidence, and criticized the European Union, the UK and the US for ignoring warnings. Such claims put him at high risk. RSF urged the UN Security Council to convene under Resolution 2222, which protects journalists in conflict, and warned that without action further extrajudicial killings of media professionals are likely. Israel is already under ICC investigation for war crimes against journalists. Two U.S. congresswomen are pushing to halt American arms sales to Israel, citing the killing of journalists in Gaza. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal urged Washington to stop supplying weapons to Israel after an Israeli strike killed 5 journalists. She noted that more than 200 media workers have been killed by Israeli forces. Jayapal and Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib have introduced legislation to restrict U.S. arms transfer to Israel, linking the move to mounting civilian and press casualties in Gaza. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus has expressed deep concern over Israel's plan to expand military operations in Gaza, citing the already dire humanitarian and health conditions. He warned further escalation risks worsening child malnutrition and healthcare access. Tedros called for immediate, unhindered aid, detainee release and a permanent ceasefire, as Netanyahu defends plans to seize Gaza City despite global fears of worsening the crisis. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has criticized Netanyahu's plan to seize Gaza City, calling it too limited. Smotrich urges a broader military takeover and the settlement of larger parts of Gaza, saying partial action risks high costs. Despite his push for a wider operation, he remains in Netanyahu's coalition, believing the government's approach can still be changed. Gaza faces mass casualties, collapsing healthcare, severe shortages and looming Israeli occupation plans as protests erupt in Israel against escalating the devastating war. And for more on this file, we now move to Rana Al-Assas in our newsroom. Rana.
Thank you so much, Hani. And for further analysis, we are joined from Algiers by the chairman of the board of directors of the International Commission to Support Palestinian Rights, Dr. Saleh Abulati. Welcome, sir, to Q News. Sir, what specific domestic and international political pressures might have influenced Prime Minister Albanese's timing for this announcement, especially in the lead up to the UN General Assembly?
First of all, good afternoon to you and to the viewers. Of course, the pressures that must be exerted against the occupation to stop their hostilities and to stop expanding the military operations is to mobilize the international efforts to reject the Netanyahu moves. And Netanyahu has provided a lot of demands to liquidate the Palestinian cause. The Arab joint stance that is completely rejecting the occupation schemes and depending on the Egyptian stance also, and we can find the entire world now condemning the Israeli plans to take over Gaza. And also in the framework of the announcing Palestine as a state by different states is a very good response to the occupation schemes. And this means a new initiative in line with the international initiatives calling for the two-state solution to confront the occupation schemes, to annex the West Bank and to take over the Gaza Strip.
Sir, how might Australia's recognition of a Palestinian state, of course coupled with New Zealand's cautious approach, influence other Western countries that have traditionally aligned with the United States and Israel on this specific issue?
Of course, there is a shift, and it's very clear as Israel has different allies due to its double standards, but the bloodshed and the martyrs of the Palestinian people and the increasing suffering left by the population in the Gaza Strip might have been a motive for these states to take different stances this time, and therefore there has been a shift in tackling the situation. It might be described as strategic to recognize to be recognized by Australia, New Zealand and Britain and France, recognizing the Palestinian state in September in the UN General Assembly. And therefore it's very important to continue building upon these international stances to support the Palestinian cause.
Sir, how does the UN Human Rights Office, which condemned the killing of journalists in Gaza, how does this development and the conflicting narratives surrounding it complicate the international community's ability to act decisively on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
In the meantime, we condemned this horrendous crime, killing the journalists, among them Anas al-Sharif, who led a very important journalistic activity with the ongoing Israeli massacres in the Gaza Strip. Israel provided some justifications, but this is a war crime. Around 237 journalists have been murdered and targeted directly. It's the highest number of journalists killed in armed conflicts in modern history in the past 25 years. The UN Commission stance towards this crisis is not enough. There must be an embargo on the occupation state, and these leaders must be held accountable for such crimes, among others, and there must be real actions to hold Israel accountable for targeting protected civilians, among them the journalists.
Sir, how does Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich's call for a wider military takeover and settlement of Gaza complicate both Prime Minister Netanyahu's political strategy and, of course, the prospects for any future peace negotiations?
Apparently, this government has adopted the Smotrich approach to liquidate the cause, which was adopted by the Knesset in 2017, to liquidate the Palestinian cause and to end the crisis by giving the Palestinians three options: either death or evacuation or to live as slaves under occupation, which were the three options were rejected by the Palestinian people, and they kept resisting over and over. They tried to provide other options, but what has Israel doing of crimes across history, and now Netanyahu and Smotrich as the most radical minister in the Netanyahu government at the moment is supporting these schemes. Netanyahu even might be more radical than Smotrich and Ben Gvir. He's just more diplomatic. They all agree on liquidating the Palestinian cause and establishing the bigger Israeli state. Now Smotrich is moving towards expanding the military operations and not being enough with the occupation of the Gaza city. This might be a difference. Now Netanyahu has no option but to continue his scheme and to satisfy the demands of Ben Gvir and Smotrich, and to settle these internal divisions inside the government. He has also the families of the detainees and the opposition to deal with, and these might mark a shift in the Israeli politics. But these stances alone cannot be depended on. There must be international action to stop such schemes aiming to reoccupy the Strip and to resettle the Israelis there.
That was Dr. Saleh Boulati from Algiers, the chairman of the board of directors of the International Commission to Support Palestinian Rights. Thank you very much for joining us on Qnews and for your insights, sir. And now we go back to Hani Saif in our studios. Hani?
Thank you, Rana. During a press conference with his Ivorian counterpart, Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has accused the Israeli government of pursuing a policy of extermination in the Gaza Strip. Abdulati condemned Israel's actions as severe violations of human rights and international law, while also expressing Egypt's complete rejection of any plans to forcibly displace Palestinians. Egypt's foreign minister highlighted Israel's harsh restrictions on humanitarian aid entering Gaza, reiterating Egypt's steadfast commitment to defending its water interests in accordance with international law and signaling a readiness to take any necessary measures to protect them. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has discussed the critical situation in Gaza with German Foreign Minister Johann Weideful. Abdulati firmly rejected Israel's decision to expand military operations, labeling it a serious threat to regional stability and an illegal entrenchment of the Israeli occupation. He urged the European Union to intervene, highlighting Israel's systematic killing and starvation of Palestinians as a flagrant violation of international law. The ministers also addressed the humanitarian crisis, with Abdulati detailing Egypt's efforts to facilitate aid and German minister expressing appreciation for Egypt's role in ceasefire and aid efforts. Italy's defense minister Guido Crosetto has sharply criticized Israel's government, saying its actions in Gaza are unacceptable and demonstrate it has lost its reason and humanity. Crosetto condemned the military campaign as not a military operation with collateral damage, but the pure denial of the law and the founding values of our civilization. He urged for humanitarian aid and called for measures that would compel Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to reconsider his approach. On possible sanctions, Crosetto said Israel's occupation of Gaza and serious acts in the West Bank represent a qualitative leap requiring decisive action. Medical sources in Gaza have reported 5 deaths from starvation and malnutrition in the past 24 hours alone, raising the total starvation-related fatalities to 222. 101 of whom were children. The worsening humanitarian crisis stems from the ongoing Israeli blockade since March 2025, which has severely restricted food and medical aid. UNRWA and WHO warned that malnutrition rates, especially among children under 5, have doubled and reached alarming levels in Gaza. In northern Gaza, residents are trekking more than 10 kilometers to reach the Zikim aid entry point for a single bag of flour, braving searing heat and Israeli gunfire. As the war in Gaza enters its 22nd month, food insecurity is worsening sharply. The Integrated Food Security Phase classification says increasingly stringent Israeli blockades have pushed the enclave closer to famine. Flour, the staple for most meals, has grown scarce. The UN says limited airdrops and aid convoys remain far below needs, with over 1,370 people killed since late May, most by Israeli forces while trying to collect food. UN agency UNRWA has urged urgent action to stop starvation in Gaza, highlighting that children are dying amid ongoing bombardments and blockade. The agency called in action and silence complicity and demanded an immediate ceasefire to prevent further loss of life. At least 217 people have reportedly died from starvation in the besieged Gaza Strip. Moving on, Jordan's news agency has announced that King Abdullah II of Jordan returned to the country on Monday after a working visit to Saudi Arabia. They added that he was accompanied by Jordan's Crown Prince Al-Hussein bin Abdullah Al-Thani. The visit, announced by the Royal Hashemite Court, aims to strengthen ties and discuss matters of mutual interest between the two nations, which have been long-standing allies. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned a recent Russian attack on Zaporizhzhia, where airdrop bombs struck residential buildings, a bus station and a clinic, injuring at least 12 people. Zelensky called for increased sanctions and international pressure on Russia, emphasizing that without concrete steps towards peace, Russia's economy must be stopped. The only thing Russia's looking for is a way to kill Ukraine, Zelensky said, urging the United States, Europe and other nations to unite in supporting peace and stability. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said he holds both fears and hope ahead of the upcoming US-Russia summit on Ukraine, but stressed Kiev must be involved in any peace negotiations. Tusk said the US has pledged to consult European partners before President Trump's meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska. He warned that territorial swaps or deals without Ukraine's consent are unacceptable. Borders can't be changed by force, Tusk said, adding that Russia must not benefit from its aggression. And US Vice President J.D. Vance has said the US is working to arrange talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, but believes Putin should meet first with President Trump. Vance also added that his administration was hoping to reach a negotiated settlement between Russia and Ukraine, but warned that both sides would probably be unhappy with the outcome. These are all the news we have for now, but here's a reminder of today's main stories. Australia announces it will formally recognize the state of Palestine at next month's UN General Assembly. The 12th humanitarian aid convoy crosses from Egypt into Gaza. And Egypt condemns Israel's actions as severe violations of human rights and international law. This concludes our news bulletin for now, but please don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.